Well, welcome everybody. My name is Robert Kaplan. I'm a senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security in Washington. And welcome to the third installment of a three-part series we've been doing at Davos on geopolitics. Now, in the first part of the series on Tuesday, we discussed new and old empires and how the imperial legacy of the past exerts its influence into the present. And I led that session. I was the main speaker. In the second session, so that was the past. In the second session, we had Parag Khanna, who's sitting in the front row here, talk about supply chains, connectivity, corridors, trade. In other words, the present. If I did the past, Parag did the present of all the global trade routes, especially in Eurasia and beyond. And today we have a real surprise. We're going to do the future. What geopolitics in connection with economics, demography, and just anything science and just anything you can think of will be like in 2030. And our main speaker today is Professor Shirley Jackson, the president of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, who has a PhD from MIT. She's a nuclear physicist, so if that doesn't intimidate you, I don't know what does. And she's had a really path-breaking career, and she's going to add a much-needed dose of a hard science background to this whole issue of development and geopolitics. Afterwards, we're going to have responses from Aisha Butti bin Bishr, who is the Director General of the Dubai Smart City Office. And a smart city, as Aisha explained to me, was utilizing technology to make the urban living experience both more efficient and more friendly and more satisfying. And then also responding will be Yohei Shibasaki, who is at the Sony Corporation for 10 years, is a Davos young global leader, and is now the CEO of the Fourth Valley Concierge Corporation, which seeks to bring talent from one developed country to another developed country. In other words, which is really something that is at the forefront of human interconnectivity and globalization. So why don't we get started with Professor Jackson, who will be talking for about 20 minutes.
Thank you, Robert. So Robert has helped us to consider the powerful connections between new and old empires and the importance of geography, even in this virtual age. And as he mentioned, Dr. Parag Khanna has helped us to consider the functional geography created by connectivity and transportation, energy, and communication. But today we will look about a dozen years into the future when changes in the energy landscape, climate change, diverging demographics between the developed and the developing world, and powerful new technologies will create intersecting vulnerabilities and opportunities with potentially cascading consequences. And these vulnerabilities and opportunities may well transcend geography and alter old alliances and even trading routes. Now, the era following the Cold War, in which the United States led the international order, is coming to a close. Russia and China are exerting regional power, and by 2030, there will be a new degree of economic power in emerging economies, including Nigeria, Iran, Egypt, Indonesia, Mexico, and Turkey. And the speed at which they are emerging is unprecedented. Globally, over 2 billion more people will enter the middle class by 2030. But it is not merely GDP that determines geopolitical power. Also key are access to and control of strategic resources, especially energy-related ones, human capital, and connectivity in terms of technology and trade. So let us consider the ways that the forces unleashed by the Fourth Industrial Revolution will work to rewrite the geopolitical maps by 2030. Now, there's no development without energy. which today remains very linked to fossil fuels, and countries derive geopolitical and economic power from that. Oil and natural gas also create complex trading relationships both within and in defiance of regional boundaries. Russia, for example, is rich in natural gas and oil and has used those riches to geopolitical advantage, for example, in Ukraine and the EU. But we are moving to a low carbon world, or at least a lower carbon world, which is driven by climate change, obviously, by steep cost reductions in and access to renewable energy, and by purely geopolitical concerns, such as a desire to loosen any one country's grip on another. Now, as Russia, for example, becomes more aggressive towards the West, including allegedly interfering in democratic elections in the US and Europe, other sources of energy offer Europe the prospect of cutting its imports of oil and gas from Russia. But around the world, more energy will be produced locally, including off-grid renewable energy that will bring power to those who do not yet have access to electricity. Let us look a little more closely at China. The International Energy Agency expects global renewable energy capacity to expand by 43% between 2017 and 2022, driven by upward revisions of solar capacity in China and India. Now, China alone will be responsible for 40% of global renewable capacity growth. And China's 13th five-year plan, ratified by the National People's Congress in 2016, positions it for even greater power in a low-carbon world. That's because its key themes include a focus on innovation to spur growth, ensuring that this growth is green and sustainable, regional coordination and inclusion of all Chinese in growth, and openness to trade represented by its One Belt, One Road plan to help create the infrastructure for an overland route to Europe through Iran, already a key trading partner, and a maritime Silk Road. Now, the program in the end encompasses 65 countries, representing 40% of global GDP. And this represents a continuation of China's long-standing policy of trading or developing infrastructure for access to key markets and resources. Now, in a low-carbon world, the most critical strategic resources will be different. And this will be a materials-based revolution, with new struggles for access and control of non-fuel mineral resources. For example, this US Geological Survey map suggests the degree to which the United States is dependent on China for mineral commodities that are essential in technology, security, and energy. And as the transportation sector moves toward electrification, critical resources include key materials for lithium-ion batteries, currently produced in very few nations. For example, as much as 54% of identified lithium resources globally are in the so-called lithium triangle of Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. 55% of cobalt is mined in the conflict-ridden Democratic Republic of the Congo, and 66% of the world's graphite is produced in China. Now, there are potentially catastrophic price shocks and security risks if the supply chains for these materials are disrupted, absent diversification, or the development of substitutes. Now, climate change will bring its own security risks. While the risks to Africa include threats to rain-fed agriculture due to drought, both India and China have low-elevation coastal cities, vulnerable to sea level rises and storm surges, cities such as Guangzhou and Shenzhen and Mumbai and Kolkata. The potential for intersecting vulnerabilities with cascading consequences then is high. Is climate change going to drive migrations beyond recent refugee crises? Will it encourage the spread of infectious diseases, increase dissatisfaction with the performance of governments in vulnerable regions such as South Asia, disrupt global supply chains, or alter access to key resources. For example, the shrinking ice cover in the Arctic Circle is opening new resources and trade routes for exploitation, including an estimated 30% of undiscovered conventional natural gas reserves and 13% of undiscovered conventional oil reserves. Now, control of these resources and routes is likely to be a source of geopolitical tensions among the US, Russia, and other nations. Another key component of geopolitical power, of course, is human capital. The world population will grow from the 7.6 billion today to 8.6 billion by 2030. India will soon overtake China as the most populous country. And by 2050, Nigeria will overtake the United States to become the third most populous nation on Earth. Now, the world then is diverging demographically, with the developed world aging and the developing world experiencing a youth boom. In 2030, the divides will be extreme, with much of Africa having a median population age under 20, while countries in Europe, as well as China, Russia, and Japan, are projected to have median ages more than twice that. Now, for the developed world, a scarcity of full-time workers will make it challenging to maintain GDP growth. Productivity growth, possibly brought on by advances in artificial intelligence and robotics and other emerging technologies, may be key here. At the same time, automation and artificial intelligence may exacerbate the decoupling of economic growth from employment, increasing the share of GDP that goes to capital rather than to labor, thereby increasing inequality within societies. Now, India, Pakistan, Egypt, Nigeria, and Kenya all will have growing working age populations between 15 and 64. Now, this could be a great economic benefit, but do they have and will they have the opportunities, education, healthcare, and infrastructure to take advantage of it? A challenge to rising living standards, working age populations that will grow the most in South Asian and African countries where average education levels are among the lowest. India will have 10 million new working age residents per year in the coming decades, but it does need to improve its energy, manufacturing, and transportation infrastructure to accommodate this growth. Now, the contrast between India's thriving technology sector and its less spectacular manufacturing sector suggests the gap between the elite education it offers in its universities and poor overall basic education. But it also suggests perhaps a broader entrepreneurship and productivity gap in the industrial sector once one moves beyond IT and pharmaceuticals. But both India and China will have another challenge to social stability, as cultural preferences for boys have skewed sex ratios in that direction. Now, recent history suggests that states with youthful populations, especially with men, and insufficient opportunities are the most prone to intrastate political violence. In the Middle East, large youth populations and the failures of governments in Egypt, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and Iraq to provide sufficient opportunities have encouraged instability. Now, the migration produced by such instability, in combination with the sense that globalization has not helped the middle classes in the developed world, are a source of geopolitical tensions and are responsible for a lot of the new nationalism in the US and the EU. And so I think of it not so much as a clash of cultures as a clash of demographics. Yet migrations can offer a long-term benefit to nations with aging and shrinking populations. Because of immigration, the United States is not projected to grow as old as quickly as nations such as Russia, Italy, Germany, Spain, and Japan. The United Nations, in fact, projects a median age of 40 in 2030 for the US. But will current policy changes alter that trajectory? That's a question. Now, net migration overall is projected to account for 82% of population growth in high-income countries by 2050. And developed nations with aging populations may find that their people do not have the skills required to create and to use the technologies of the future. But here's a question. Can technology enable intergenerational linkages in ways that create greater productivity and innovation, and thereby confer economic strength by virtue of building economies that can simultaneously take advantage of the forward-thinking and risk-taking of the young and the wisdom and experience of older populations? And this will require a new kind of intergenerational compact that has yet to evolve. But one challenge is clear, and that is that technology is making governing more difficult. Technological diffusion and communications connectivity can lead to social control slipping away from the primacy of the state in several directions at once. It allows transnational alliances, such as alliances among multinational corporations, non-governmental organizations, and other multilateral organizations at one end of the spectrum, or transnational terrorists or criminal groups at the other end. It allows as well internal groupings, including cities and states, to challenge central governments and to create instabilities, even without large militaries, economies, or populations, but that can happen as well with non-recognized governmental entities. Now, the increasing expectations of a rising global middle class could fuel dissatisfaction with prevailing leadership and provoke instability. But this shift is not merely due to people being able to see things and connectivity, but is also due to the fact that many of the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution can be weaponized, even by non-state actors. You know that ISIS used commercial drones to carry bombs in Mosul. Grenade launchers can in fact be manufactured using 3D printers. CRISPR gene editing may facilitate the creation of biological weapons, and cyber-physical systems offer new angles of attack and challenge traditional definitions of warfare that are typically based on kinetic attacks. Now, Syria offers an example of intersecting vulnerabilities with cascading consequences that result from the collision of intrastate, interstate, and transnational tensions. You know, conflict between the government and rebel groups that began protesting during the Arab Spring became both a proxy war between the US, Russia, and a number of other nations, and a war against ISIS, but importantly, creating 5.5 million refugees. And the movement of those refugees have helped to alter the politics in the European Union. Now, in Mexico, the government is facing another kind of threat, conflict between drug-related criminal organizations and politicians, soldiers, law enforcement, and civilians, which has been responsible for between 80,000 and 100,000 deaths since 2006. And there are states, such as China, which are using technologies to exert control, monitor social behavior, and reward that which conforms to the desires of the government. But at the same time, and China's an interesting study, is focused intently on innovation and technology, moving away from manufacturing of low-cost products invented elsewhere. Now, the role of education, research, and innovation is well established in creating economic and social power, and this is only likely to increase in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, scientific and technological leadership is important for China's military power, but also for its claim to international political and economic leadership. China now publishes nearly as many articles in peer-reviewed scientific and engineering journals as the United States. And under its 13th five-year plan, China plans to increase public and private R&D spending from 2.1% to 2.5% of GDP, approaching the 2.8% that the United States spends. It plans to raise the volume and quantity of its patents and strengthen its intellectual property protection, increase the contribution of scientific and technological advances to economic growth, and invest in human capital. In fact, by 2030, across the G20 and OECD nations, China and India together will supply 50% of the 25 to 34-year-olds with tertiary education, and the US just 8%. So China is following a path, clearly, to geopolitical leadership taken by the US in the years following World War II, with government support for fundamental research and development, much of it conducted by universities, leading to breakthroughs that power new enterprises and existing ones. But when one considers China's stated priorities in science, it seems to be following that of the great universities in the world, including my own. And those priorities include quantum communications and computing, brain research, cybersecurity, robotics, gene science, and big data and its applications, all things that have been discussed here at Davos all week. Now, we believe that one of the linchpins of the fourth industrial revolution, and remember you heard it here first, will be an intelligent internet of intelligent things, in which the internet, the network itself, is smart and recognizes opportunities and vulnerabilities, perhaps in data streams, and the devices it connects also are smart and able to adapt to changing conditions. And that means it has to be governed by a hierarchy of cognitive agents. And this intelligent internet of intelligent things is crucial to addressing many challenges that we face, from cybersecurity to advancing robotics, to enabling personalized medicine, to making use of the tsunami of digital data that humanity generates every day. Now, geography, as the prior speakers have said, is to some extent destiny, as is control of strategic resources. But the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution will play strongly against emergent and historical geopolitical alignments. And so there will be a new energy equation, one in which more energy will be produced locally, as well as new definitions of critical strategic resources. Climate change will expose new vulnerabilities and new shocks to the global order, but it will reinforce the value of global coordination and cooperation. And demographics will force a new reckoning between the aging developed world and the youthful developing world. Technology will allow new transnational alliances, but it can deepen intrastate divisions. But all of these argue for new mechanisms for promoting peace and prosperity around the world. And in the end, that is my message. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much for that, Professor Jackson, for that rich, jam-packed, provocative presentation that ended literally at 20 minutes. So, you know, something that strikes me about that, you know, quite a number of things, but one thing in particular is, you know, if you talk about new economic power in emerging economies, 2 billion more people in the middle class, what we're really talking about is a flatter hierarchy of power. That we may, you know, we've gone from a unipolar world right after the Berlin Wall fell,
right.
and we're moving into a multipolar world. But you're describing a future that goes beyond multipolarity, with a much flatter hierarchy, which tempts a certain degree of anarchy, perhaps. And so, you know, that's really something to keep in mind, especially as what you said, technology makes government itself more difficult.
That's correct. But it also suggests new groupings within nation states and across nation states, but those groupings may be among groups you don't think about. We talk about non-state actors, but we have to think about it in the corporate sense. We have to think about it where it can go across cultures. And that's why I say the real clash is the clash of demographics. I don't think of it as the clash of cultures.
Okay, all right. Well, our next speaker who's going to react to this is Aisha Butti bin Bishr from Dubai, the head of the whole smart city office there.
Thank you, dear. Do you hear my voice? Yeah, okay. And thank you, Dr. Shirley, for the comprehensive brief on how our world would be in 2030. In the UAE in general and Dubai specifically, we have taken a special approach to be ready for the 2030 and beyond. Our leadership envisioned that despite the country achievements realized in many of essential sectors, future planning and readiness are a shared responsibilities between people and government. We focus on building a sustainable economy for future generations, not in the UAE only, but across the region, and contribute to the world future. It is not a secret that when His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the Crown Prince of our capital, Abu Dhabi State, and Deputy Supreme Commander of the Armed Force announced last year that UAE will celebrate the last barrel of oil in 2050. 70% of our GDP, by the way, is independent from oil. So our leadership set a goal to have a new equation for our economy where we neither depend on oil nor market fluctuations. We will add new economic sectors, leverage efficiency, productivity in current sectors also. We want to prepare generations capable to lead a sustainable, balanced national economy. While we have mid-term plans like the Dubai 2021 vision, where we will celebrate our 50th Golden Jubilee of our nation, our leadership also taught us that the future doesn't wait for anyone, and we have to make it today. That's why we have launched the UAE Centennial 2071. The UAE Centennial 2071 project to put in place a vision that extends to 5 decades and to prepare the nation for future generations. While we are planning for our future, we kept the UN 2030 agenda at the heart of our plans to contribute to the global sustainability. The UAE is taking several steps to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, at home and abroad. The SDGs are based on the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. And in June 2016, Sheikh Mohammed, the Vice President, Prime Minister of UAE, launched the Dubai Industrial Strategy 2030 to elevate Dubai into a global platform for knowledge-based, sustainable, and innovation-focused businesses. We are focusing more into knowledge economy. Dubai Industrial Strategy is based on 5 key objectives that will serve as a foundation for Dubai's industrial future. The strategy aims to increase the total output and value addition of the manufacturing sector, enhance the depth of knowledge and innovation, make Dubai a preferred manufacturing platform for global businesses, promote environmentally friendly and energy efficient manufacturing, and making Dubai a center for all the global Islamic product market. The strategy has further identified 6 priority subsectors: aerospace, maritime, aluminum and fabricated metals, pharmaceutical and medical equipment, food and beverages, and machinery and equipment. These subsectors were chosen based on their importance to Dubai Industrial Strategy and the Dubai Plan 2021, as well as their future growth prospects, export potential, and mid-term to long-term economic impact. We answer the questions of tomorrow today by keeping tab on the latest global advancement and what arise of it. We believe that emerging technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, and other examples represents a golden opportunity in achieving better future in 2030 and beyond, and specifically in overcoming classical challenges like resources, budgets. That's why we launch many global firsts. The first city to run its government services on top of blockchain, the first government artificial intelligence lab, the first unified holistic big data platform for a whole city, and many others. Thank you.
Well, that really neatly follows on. It's sort of a response from one place, Dubai, to the challenges that Professor Jackson said. You know, she had said technology makes government more difficult, and you seem to be, Dubai seems to be acknowledging that and dealing with it. That, you know, you've got to find a way to make, you know, to sort of keep a hierarchical order, but within the framework of making people more satisfied.
Absolutely. We believe that if we didn't disrupt ourselves, others will come and disrupt us. That's why we need to be ready. We need to prepare our system, prepare our generation to be ready for all these new technologies. Nowadays, kids with 5 years old, they know how to use iPhones much better than me and you. That's why, as a government, we put a proper strategy in ground to make sure that the youth are involved in setting all these plans and policies for the future.
It's almost as if a government cannot satisfy the youth, the government is in trouble.
Absolutely.
Because that's where instability comes from.
I'm not sure if you've seen our artificial intelligence minister here in Davos. He's only 27 years old. We have a minister of youth, she's only 23 years old. And we have a minister of advanced technologies, she's only advanced science, she's only 28 years old, and she's the one who is responsible of our Mars mission. And all of the cabinet actually are younger than 40 years old.
Wow, it's so that's impressive. What, you know, I guess what concerns me is that Dubai's at the head of the curve here, but there are too many places around the earth that are not ahead of the curve, that are behind the curve.
I know, it doesn't feel nice also.
Yeah, and that they're the ones most prone to disruption, to political disruption as time goes on. Well, our last speaker is Yohei Shibasaki, who I said is 10 years with Sony, who's at the forefront of what globalization is about on the ground level, with moving people around the world in search of different high expertise jobs. So, Yohei, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah.
They turn it on for you.
Thanks. Let me focus on my territory. I'm expert in human resource, recruitment, education, and international mobility. So since I founded my company, Force Valley, I have been supporting the young talents in developing countries to get a job in developed countries, mainly from Asia to Japan or Singapore, others, sometimes in Silicon Valley. Yeah. Why I started this? There was two main reasons. When I quit Sony 10 years ago, in the headquarters, there were no foreign employee at all. So I thought, hey, there's a big demand even for the Japanese leading companies to acquire more talents from all over the world. And one more reason was, still, the situation hasn't changed, but there's huge numbers of recruitment companies in the world, but almost all of them focus on domestic hiring. And I don't see any companies who are focusing on cross-border recruiting and placement like us in the world. To achieve it, I have been involved in lots of Japanese government's project or overseas government's project, and I was selected as a committee member of Ministry of Labor of Japan to discuss about the policy of acquiring foreign laborers from abroad. I think today we see an unbalanced world structure in terms of population. Countries with population explosion and countries with population decline, like us. Yeah. So for example, my country, Japan, is famous for its decline and aging population. We lost 42% of 18-year-old population in these 25 years. So the population of young people is becoming half. Yeah. So what we have to do next? still, to mention about Japan, Japan is sold as a country that never accept, not never, but that don't accept like immigrants or refugees so much. Yeah. And it's still, the policy hasn't changed. But indeed, actually, the situation is totally different. Because if that policy hasn't changed at all, my business, my service, to bring talents from all over the world to Japan will never exist, right? Why my business is successful? The reason is very simple. Politically, Japan announces that no refugees, no immigrants. But actually, we accept lots of foreign employees, workers from all over the world. In these 18 years, the numbers of foreign people working in Japan almost becoming like 3 times larger than before. So, as I mentioned, there's countries with population explosion, but on the other hand, countries with population decline. If we think about it like globally, I think we can provide a solution to make this balance better. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be a like strict policy regarding immigration. Of course, in order to solve the current unbalanced situation, the immigration refugee policies are the key. But as I mentioned, even the government says no immigrants, no refugees. Actually, if the company wants that talent, wants that people as a labor, they can get a working visa. In Japan, I've been proceeding this business for 10 years, but no one failed to get the working visa after they got an offer from Japanese companies. But the minimum requirement was like more than bachelor degree. We need to think in a bigger picture. I understand that the demographic problems differ country by country, region by region. But human resource solutions should not only be country to country, government to government, cooperation to make it more efficient, and meaningful, but should be a worldwide approach where the whole world benefits from it. For example, the developed world with aging, declining population can invest for the trainings or education for the improvement of knowledge and skills in developing world with blooming youth. And as a result, can be provided with labor from those activities. So how are we going to make this happen? I believe it is also my mission as a private sector to create a digital platform using today's technology where anyone in the world can be connected with opportunities from all over the world. Refugees should also know where they are wanted and where they are welcome to work. Japan, last year, more than 10,000 people applied as refugees, but only 28 was approved, 0.3%. But as I mentioned, everyone through our company got the working visa and successfully came to Japan. Not like 10, 20, thousands. So, usually, the issue to support like immigrants, refugees, is who will bear the cost. And there was lots of sessions in this week to discuss about how to support immigrants, how to support the refugees, and if we can provide some digital solutions, who bear that? But I have a solution. In my opinion, those who are looking to hire that kind of people should bear the cost. And that's my business model. And that is more reasonable and humane. And the candidate's side should also make effort to gain the necessary skill that is required. I think this is a healthy ecosystem we can create worldwide. I'm working on this by creating an online digital platform that is called Connect. I will release that this spring. That makes people all over the world to be able to find the opportunities, job, from all over the world. And they can also realize which country they can get the visa. Yeah. So from around the world, and we believe that our activity can encourage immigration and support the refugees. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I think the common thread here is that with even Japan demographically opening up to outsiders, and as you said, how technology can enable migration at the upper economic levels, it's another indication of how we're facing, how we're entering not only a world beyond multipolarity, but a world that's truly transnational and post-national. So that this upsurge in nationalism and populism that we see may just be a swan song for the decline of the state, of the nation as an ethnic group as we know it. We have quite a bit of time, so I'm going to open it up to questions from the floor. And why don't I take 2 questions at a time? Please keep them short. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jackson, for your presentation. I'm from India, and clearly it's going to be the biggest country in population and connected through broadband. So the intelligent internet, as you have now put forward, has a role to play, except we hope that it will be benevolent influences on it. My point is that in the people most affected due to climate change, it is South Asia and Africa. But South Asia, yes, we may have a common identity, but we have a lot of conflicts, a lot of internal issues there. And I wonder whether we are all ready, or whether what would be the solutions that could be coming out. Because while we help each other, if there's an earthquake or some other catastrophe, the countries in that area help each other. But if it were to become, the conditions were to become even more difficult, how will we manage that? And whether the role of this intelligent internet, or the people coming in and the younger people connecting, is that going to make a difference? Or are we going to break into our spirit?
Okay, so we have one question about, are we ready to deal and manage with climate change? Who has the floor here? Oh, yes, yeah.
Brett Solomon from Access Now. There's been a number of sessions looking at biometrics and the development of technologies which are able, excuse me, to collect information about us and our identity, and then also about the collection and the storage of those biometrics in identification databases. So just bringing the concept of like populations and technology together, and thinking about how, and the intelligent, and hopefully benign, intelligent, or beneficial intelligent internet, like bring all those pieces together to 2030. What are the implications that you see in terms of movement of people and the relationship between individuals, the citizens, and the state?
Okay, so why don't you start?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, if you kind of peel back all the layers, there are 2 things that kind of stand out in my mind, from what I said. One has to do with demographic shifts, where the young are versus where the old are. I educate the young, I'm on the old side, so I think about this a lot. The other is that there are broader influences such as climate change. And to what extent can technology exacerbate or, in fact, mitigate some of the challenges? So you talked about regions that are vulnerable vis-a-vis climate. I don't have time, but there are many ways. I think some of the ways we talk about creating databases, although I've heard some important talks here, and how we use them is very important. So here's an example for you. If you think of China having its One Belt, One Road initiative, which has to do with building physical infrastructure, all the way to Europe, and through large parts of South Asia, there is an opportunity as that happens to develop infrastructure in a way that's not going to solve climate change, but can help to mitigate its effects. And so I think those are some of the kinds of discussions that need to go on. A second is that we talk a lot about technologies in the sense of, what we do with Google, the things that have to do with consumer type activities. But some of the most important kinds of databases have to do with things where you do monitoring of weather, where you marry satellite data with things happening on the ground, where you study disease vectors, and you can play it against what you actually see with behaviors of people in different regions. Those kind of things have some of the greatest potential to be not only predictive, but help to detect when certain things are about to change. And those are the kinds of big challenges that I think we need to think about, have partnerships with the private sector about, because it's in their interest, and what we need to educate our students to, and that's certainly what we're doing. And then, you talked about all the information about people, but there have been a lot of talks about blockchain here. And I think there is this coming question, it's been there here all the time, of who owns the data, who controls it. And so things like blockchain, those kinds of technologies, give us an opportunity to think about who keeps the data and how is it released.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
And I
Jump
think,
in.
regarding the data, and I believe that the young generation definition of privacy is different than us. And
Till they get old.
yeah, absolutely. So we need to educate them. What does it mean, privacy? How do they share their data? To whom they can share their data? Until then, it will be difficult for government or private sector to put those boundaries, because today, who owns these data? Is it us as individuals? Is it communities? Is it cities, government, private sector? It's scattered all over the place. But the amount of opportunities that we can have from collecting and analyzing and learning from this data is huge. So we should see it from both a perspective, like educating people, but also preparing ourselves to harness the benefit from these data.
Okay, Parag?
Thank you. And this, being the third session, let me say it's been just
Yeah.
amazing, the work that the forum has put in to construct this arc of sessions covering all of these dimensions of geopolitics. And a couple of points I want to make. The first is it's extremely difficult to articulate the relevance of what people consider to be soft issues like environment and social and economic factors to geopolitics. It's something that Dr. Jackson, you did absolutely beautifully just now. And a reminder, though, that 25 years ago, Bob Kaplan wrote one of the most famous essays ever called The Coming Anarchy, which did the same thing. But whereas what Bob did when looking at these softer factors was pointing to how destabilizing they are, how fracturing they can be, how vulnerable they make societies. What Shirley did just now is to show how those same factors become competitive features of the system, how we're competing now over these environmental technologies that help societies become or cope with complexity. And that's the arc that we've just come through, and we're entering a new phase now. So I want to bring this back to the main theme of this meeting, because it's about the fractured world. What I want to posit, though, is that we cannot map out this fracturing based on north, south, east, west, or even rich, poor by traditional, conventional measures. Instead, what we're seeing is that the divide or the fracturing is between those places, those, I'll call them islands of stability, that are able to proactively cope with these potential disruptions, with these new technologies, with the volatility around climate issues, with their demographic circumstances, and those that don't. And it can be a large country like China, it can be a city like Dubai, or other places. And we find those pockets, those islands of stability in places that we expect, So within the United States, we may find it in New York City, maybe Berlin, or in places we don't expect, with Dubai so rapidly emerging on the world map as being a place that's proactively dealing with these issues. In Latin America, maybe not Mexico as a country, but Mexico City, perhaps,
That's
right? Not South America as a continent, or even Brazil as a country, but maybe Bogota or something like that. What I find, though, is that these islands of stability want nothing more than to connect to each other, right? They want to share and trade and exchange in technology, talent, capital flows.
Knowledge.
So they don't see the world.
And knowledge also.
And knowledge. So they don't see the world as fractured at all. They say, we are doing the right thing here, and whatever our federal policy is or whatever competitors are doing, not important. We're going to focus on building this island of stability and building networks. So the question is, that flows from this is, are these islands of stability in a way going to build moats around themselves and say, let's just focus on whatever relationships are productive for us, because all of the societies around us, these poorer places, poorly governed countries, even if they're rich, are not doing the right things to prepare for the future. They're going to fall behind.
Well, I think
reactions to what
I think
Parag
history
said?
has shown that moats don't work for very long. What I would say is this, and this is also something I hope you extracted from my comments, that a lot of what powers these kinds of places depends upon resources that most people don't think about. They almost think about them as being in the background. Where they are tends to be in geographies that are not ones that necessarily overlap with these, coping places. And so there has to be more thought on both from a self-interest point of view as to whether people can really become, these sort of islands can moat themselves off, but also from a human point of view of what does this say about us as a planet and a species if somehow we think we can kind of jump over the places that are having problems. And so if you want to have wind turbines and new automobiles and different kinds of things, you're going to use cobalt. And a lot of that cobalt sits in the Congo. And so do you think you can extract, and because that's been the history, is extraction and leave behind. And that's just not going to work.
Yeah, and something that follows from that is that increasingly companies like Tesla, Apple need cobalt for their batteries.
That's what I'm saying.
And yet there's more and more pressure from human rights groups not to exploit miners in the Congo. So that companies are not just going to be able to extract, even if they have all the technology. There's going to be pressure from social action groups. This really gets complicated.
As a city, I do agree with Parag that today we are exploring many networks to share best practices, knowledge, standards, policies with other cities. Even the international organizations are not supporting such. Still, international organizations talk about countries, whether it be indices or standards. It's all about countries. Wherein when you talk about federal level, it's so difficult and the process takes a long time, wherein local government, cities, not necessarily first city, second and third cities and countries can run much faster in implementing many futuristic ideas that will benefit them in producing more efficient economy. But not necessarily forgetting also to support other areas in the world. What we announced in Dubai end of last year, a program called A Million Coder, wherein we teach million young Arab people from the Arab region how to code using program protocols and AI protocols, just to open a new future for them. And many other similar projects in many of the refugees camps, whether in Jordan or in Lebanon, to teach the young people.
Thank you. Yohei, do you have anything to add here?
for this agenda.
Okay, okay. More questions? Okay, Minister?
Thank you very much. First of all, I must commend you on this series. I have been through, you can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Three of them, so they are quite interesting and challenging, and I don't want to make life much more complicated. But I think if you are going with this, I have to bring the subject of governance. This future definitely change is different from the past, whereby governance seems to have come first many times. There's good level playing field, and then technology evolved. This is totally the opposite. Governance is not catching up. It's way behind. Look at the drones. I know that there will be a meeting sometime in July to talk about the regulation of drones, and the drones now are part of life already. So these utilities, if you would, of the future, these networks of the future coming back to you, which are probably becoming a public good, who's going to regulate them? Because they seem to have a mind of their own. They're self-regulatory now. Who's regulating Google? Who's regulating Amazon? Who's setting the level playing field where people from the public and the world at large is become voluntarily participant at the right prices, the right protocol, the right contract between the user and the provider, if you will. This is where I think I could see from the meetings here. I mean, these are probably the monopolies of the future. So who's regulating them as we keep rushing into all of that? Smart cities, of course, are a great thing, and all of these technologies will change our life. But then, is there a platform somewhere where we don't see that seems to be now catching up and will deal with this? Or this will keep going ahead of us? And then the second question would be, if we are training the people who develop the technologies, who's training the users? Because I think the users are left behind. That's why you would see in every item, while there's 1 million using it, there's about 20 million not using it. And the reason is someone has not educated them enough and not ready to pull that knowledge. So these are two questions I am puzzled with as I speak to you and I listen to you.
Okay, yeah. Aisha?
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with you, Your Excellency. That's why I said today as a cities, we are looking forward to have this kind of platform that we can discuss a proper governing solution for all these new advanced technologies that is disrupting our life. Nothing yet. We are still exploring opportunities, whether with WEF or with the United Nations or with the World Bank, to have a proper platform that cities can come and collaborate together to put this kind of a proper framework for governing everything happening around us. And when it's come to awareness, I totally again agree with you. A small example, in Dubai, we have a smart parking solution wherein you can park your car with an app or even SMS, you can get a ticket for your parking. The penetration of the smart devices in Dubai is 200%. So every person have 2, 3, 4 mobiles. And yet you find people park their car, go run to find coins to get their tickets. And he has 2 or 3 mobiles in his hand. So whose fault is this? The system are there, the technology is there, but because we didn't put more effort to educate people, spread awareness of all the resources that are available in our cities. We are trying to put a proper also awareness campaign in Dubai for all the systems that are coming, whether exist or coming in the near future. But this is by itself is a huge issue because our aim as a smart city is to provide this kind of efficient, seamless, happy experiences. But if the people, they don't know about these experiences, so it will be a waste of money and time.
Professor Jackson, final quick word.
Well, I'm going to go back to the minister's question because I think it is so important. I think we're at a moment where one has to consider both definition and activity. And what do I mean by that? There are things happening that force us to think about what is the definition of warfare. You know, if one had infrastructure in your country and some planes sent by another country came and bombed it, that would be considered an act of war. But there are many things that can be quite destructive that are not initiated by kinetic attacks. And so if one wants to think about stability in the cyber world, those kind of discussions are going to have to occur. A second becomes, as you point out, where is the, and should the, some people would argue there shouldn't be, but where is the regulatory piece? But how do you do that in a transnational framework? And that's the kind of thing that I think it is important to have discussions about. So I'm co-chair for the World Economic Forum with Espen Eid of what's called the Global Future Council on International Security. And so what we're actually trying to do is to take a number of these factors and create scenarios around them and to actually create gaming exercises that we then will post with, on WEF's platform so that people can come together in a multi-stakeholder way and look at what one might do. Because I don't think any of us have the answer. Now, I happen to have served on the International Security Advisory Board for our Secretary of State, John Kerry, and before that, Hillary Clinton. And we spent a lot of time trying to give a definition to cyber stability, global cyber stability, because there has to be a framework.
I think on that note.
And we didn't succeed totally,
Yeah.
but that's what has to happen.
Well,
So,
we started with empires on Tuesday, and we end really with a race for human ingenuity, because that's really that's really the dynamic here.
Right.
Thank you so much for the panel.
thank you. Thank you.